Imagine relocating a vast number of the population of a country like, for example, the United States or Brazil, or a nation in Africa like Egypt. Imagine any of those areas or any area in the world becomes so uninhabitable, so egregiously inept and inadequate for human living, human habitation, that you have to export and relocate a large number of your inhabitants, let's say 50% of your inhabitants of that country, that nation's inhabitants, to a part of the world like the Arctic, let's say Antarctica, in the South Pole, in the South polar area of the region, the Arctic, the Antarctic region of the world. Just imagine that, and how stupid and ridiculous that idea is. Right now, the polar regions of the world are largely uninhabited. In the case of the South Pole areas, regions, Antarctic regions, it's mostly uninhabited. As far as, people living, working, and enjoying life there is no such thing. There are a smattering, just a few dozen scientists stationed there at any one time of the year, because the conditions are so inhospitable. The conditions are so cold for the better part of the year. The environment is so dry, and the ice is just so incessant on given and consistent that people just cannot live there or cannot justifiably live there. People can definitely live there for short periods or for even longer periods with very high amounts of resources being spent. So it comes down to the viability of the place, how many resources it takes to live there, how much does it cost to stay there, stay alive, and have any type of quality of life. It is so high in the Antarctic that we as a human species have not found it anywhere near justifiable to live there. So if we have not settled the Antarctic, or even the Arctic, which is much more mild and cooler, more habitable or warmer in comparison to the Antarctic. If we have not found it viable and worth it to live there, imagine living in a place like Mars. The planet Mars, which is much, much colder than the Antarctic on average, which is much, much drier than the Antarctic on average. And to top it off, it has a lot less gravity than the Antarctic. As a matter of fact, only a fraction of the gravity. Not only that, but it doesn't have a breathable atmosphere like the Antarctic and Arctic regions do. For all of its coldness and uncomfortableness of the Antarctic and dangers, they still have a breathable atmosphere. And you can actually stand outside and breathe the air and not require a spacesuit. So imagine the ridiculousness of moving to Mars, or of settling Mars and living Mars. Not only is Mars colder with a toxic atmosphere, and with very little gravity, but it's hundreds of thousands of miles away, further than the Arctic or Antarctic regions are to any one part of the world that is a lot more habitable. So that tells you and gives you an idea of the ridiculousness of the whole scheme, the whole proposals, the entire idea of colonizing and settling Mars. Mars is many times, hundreds of times more inhospitable again than the Arctic and Antarctic. Yet we have not found it necessary nor worth it to live in the Antarctic or Arctic, for the most part. Yet we have clowns and people like Elon Musk and other people like Richard Zubrin and many other enthusiasts, scientists that support the idea of settling and living on Mars. The idea is romantic. It seems like an exciting thing to embark in. However, when we do the math, when we take in consideration the factors, if we have any sort of honesty with ourselves and any value for evidence and science, we must come to the conclusion that as of right now, settling, colonizing, moving to, or otherwise living on Mars is a terrible idea and an utter disaster waiting to happen. As we stand right now, as our current technology is at this moment in our states of affairs here on Earth. Earth, for the first, let me just give a few reasons why the experts or the enthusiasts, the wannabe scientists like Elon Musk and other scientists like Richard Zubrin that so enthusiastically push the idea of settling Mars. They claim that we must live in more than one world as humans. I don't have a problem with that idea. However, Mars is not a very good candidate because of the reasons that I just mentioned. Again, the distance, the low gravity, the temperatures, the toxicity of the environment or the atmosphere, the lack thereof in atmosphere, the radiation that showers and just smothers the surface daily, the occurrence of dust storms since the area is so dry that is drier than even the driest desert here on Earth. The lack of water. I mean, we have not been able to settle the Sahara and other deserts. The Moby, I believe it's called, the other deserts in the world. We have not settled those. There's very few people, if any, living in many areas of those, many desert areas, because it is so difficult to bring water to those areas and to live comfortably in those areas. Yet we want to settle, apparently, according to many, a world that is entirely a desert, drier, colder, and more barren than many times colder, drier, and more barren than the worst of the worst deserts on Earth. And yet many find it a good idea to go there and create a city. First, let's discuss some of the other pretexts, reasons, what they call reasons to settle Mars. And it's also as a defense, as a insurance against worldwide catastrophes, many of which have not happened since the age of the dinosaurs, many million years ago. We live in an era that high or large body impacts are so unlikely that it is almost insignificant. The likelihood of getting hit by an asteroid the size of the Chicxulub event, which is what many believe, not sure, but many scientists believe was the catalyst of the not the eradication of the dinosaurs, but the severe killing off of the dinosaur species, the severe decline, almost complete but not entirely, of the dinosaurs and many other animals. So that meteor impact is really not a good reason. We could survive even a Chicxulub type event, although quite dramatically, uncomfortably, quite painfully. It is not impossible, especially if humankind employs much better reasoning, much better decision making than what they did during the last catastrophic event, which is the coronavirus, killing many millions over the period of 3 years or so. So as long as we use better sense, better common sense, better judgment, the next time we are probably to experience less death, suffering, and destruction. So the meteor impact argument is really not a strong one, especially when we have all this technology to detect meteors incoming for years ahead of time. Very likely possibility that we are going to improve even on that, and perhaps detect incoming meteors or bodies, celestial bodies, decades into the future, with decades of notice and warning, giving us many options to either deflect, destroy, relocate populations, whatever the necessary steps may be, we can take with a couple of decades worth of warning and time to react. So the meteor impact event is just ludicrous and in reality very weak. The other pretext that a lot of people bring, even scientists, is the flurry of new technology, new ideas, developments, the advancement that such an endeavor will bring, such as going to Mars, more or less like the Apollo program brought many technologies, many advances, much pride, much advancement in industry, in all kinds of industry, the mobilization of all those resources and the jobs it will create could be seen as a very good thing, very good series of things that will happen, that will aid in the advancement of many things, and I do agree with some of that. However, it doesn't take a space exploration or a planet colonization to achieve something very similar to that, or the same, or even bigger than the advancements that would be achieved by such endeavor, like a colonization of space or going to the moon. I believe we could achieve much of that simply by putting ourselves to it. Yes, there are many technologies that would be developed because of the necessity to be able to have humans live in an environment that is utterly uninhabitable and inadequate for human habitation. But we can decide to do that right here in the Arctic, Antarctic, in the deserts of the world. Inhabit those areas first, and build dome cities in the desert, in the Arctic, Antarctic, and develop those technologies needed to maintain those domed cities that way, which is much more direct, much less painful, much less death and suffering, much less cost, to achieve a very similar, same, or even more and quicker results. So another reason why many enthusiasts push the moving out to Mars is the idea that we can terraform Mars and we can make it a more habitable, even a very habitable place. And this is just a ludicrous and loony idea pushed around by people that have a lot of hope and a lot of creativity and a lot of fantasies about living in a utopia, in a world that they can control a lot of things and be important figures, have all sorts of power, have all sorts of space and territory, and control a lot of it, and have a technologically advanced society that could be designed, could be planned, cities could be planned from scratch and be designed very smartly and efficiently. That's all fine and dandy and romantic on paper, but in reality, terraforming Mars is as much of a pipe dream as it gets, as you can imagine. Terraforming Mars is basically a stupid and just idiotic idea. Something that would take so much resources that the Earth as a planet, humanity as a planet, has not even gotten anywhere near to producing the amount of time that we've been here on Earth. Since the Industrial Revolution, at least, we have not gotten to the enormous amount of resources and energy required to even begin to do such thing. The plans to do such things, such as putting factories and polluting the Martian atmosphere, the thin atmosphere it has, to the point it will create a greenhouse effect large enough to envelop the planet and warm it up, and water all of a sudden could be in liquid form, and we could inject oxygen and grow plants, whatever. I mean, this is beyond ludicrous, beyond any kind of reality. Even if we did produce the amount of material, energy, and resources and raw materials necessary to do such thing, the effects would be so uncontrollable and so out of control that we can very easily either overshoot, we can very easily not do enough, or undershoot and the whole thing collapses, or we can basically mess things up so bad that we have to abandon the whole project and waste years and decades, if not hundreds of years of effort, time, money, resources, etc. Not to mention the possibility of killing off whatever society or whatever community we were able to manage to have settled on Mars. So that's just out of the question. Terraforming Mars is just a dream, and I will leave it at that. Another and the final thing that a lot of the Mars advocates push is the possibility for our species to break off into a new species, a new species that's smarter, that is more intelligent, more resourceful. Somehow they think that this will happen, but in reality, people have very little control. They think that they have, all the keys to all of the tweaks and enhancements that humans need. This may be true to a limited sense here with, medical technologies, our medical knowledge, our body of knowledge in biology and medicine and genetics, etc. However, to think that just by moving to a lower gravity, less habitable, colder, and toxic place, and having to be able to survive, that will somehow make us a much more advanced species that will outthink and outdo humans as they are, is far from logical, is far from having any kind of evidence, or any kind of evidence base behind it. It's far from being sane, and it is just something that, again, we hope to be true, we hope that we can achieve, but in fact we have no idea whether that will be the case or not. In all likelihood, I believe that Martians may become smaller humans because of the gravity, may become a species that is very similar to humans in intelligence, a species that will be for a very long time compatible with humans, a species that will be not that different from humans, apart from looks and perhaps culture. Just like human culture differs here in different parts of the world, and the human looks differ for many parts of the world. Same thing would happen for Martians, people born in Mars, if that is even a possibility with the low gravity there. And we just don't know what will happen. And that is assuming that we can get used to the very, very low gravity. I believe is less than 10%, less than a quarter, to be sure, of Earth's gravity, which is detrimental. Gravity is detrimental for every organ in our bodies, every cell in our bodies, every living organism, in fact, on the world and on Earth depends on Earth's gravity. And the minute that this much we know, the minute that we leave Earth's gravity and go into microgravity, such as in low Earth orbit or the moon or wherever, bone density starts to decrease, muscle mass starts to decrease, all kinds of functions, cardiovascular functions start to decay, even other functions like hearing, sight, cognitive functions start to decay. I mean, the health risks and problems are just enormous, are just stupid to ignore. And the longer we stay in that type of environment, the more severe those symptoms are. There is no sign, no evidence, as far as I know, that those wane, that the body starts to adjust. There is no such knowledge that the body, no evidence that I know of, that the body will adjust to such gravity. Even if we assume that babies born will begin to have different body types, different body functions, I mean, that's not how evolution works. Evolution works through death, and the amount of evolution that happens is dependent on the amount of death and the survivors of the events that cause organisms to evolve, to change. For example, if you have 100 babies and you throw them, you put them in an environment that is quite tough for them to survive, and one of them survives and was able to reproduce with another organism or human that was able to survive, and they have offspring that's able to survive in that environment. 99% of them did not make it, only 1% did. Then those traits that organism has, the human, whatever it is, are the ones that are going to survive, and presumably they are different enough to cause a change. So a lot of death and destruction and suffering is required for evolution through natural selection. That is just how it works. We can try genetic manipulation, but again, there are risks involved with that, and there are problems that could arise with that, and many ethical issues arise from it. And not only that, but genetic issues may arise that we may not be aware of initially, and then it could cause problems down the line. So to create new humans, new species, supposedly and presumably more advanced, it's just ludicrous. It's just another bad idea, just another wish and wishful thinking based on very little, if any, evidence or even common sense. So the cost, let's go through the reasons why going to Mars is just excruciatingly stupid and painful and risky and not even worth it. And to me, yes, it is a nice dream. However, there are 110 to 1,000 steps or 1,000 things that we can do here on Earth before we even try such an endeavor. The cost to go to Mars is so high, and the problems that we presently have here on Earth are so many that require a lot of funds, a lot of resources, a lot of labor, human attention that is just unjustifiable to spend those resources and money and time and labor on a stupid and worthless and frankly counterproductive endeavor such as going to Mars or settling Mars or terraforming Mars. We can use that money right here, right now. We can use those resources right here, right now to help the many among us that need the help desperately. There are still people dying of hunger. There are still people homeless that don't want to be homeless. There are many that cannot afford and that are struggling to afford a basic way of life. There are many, perhaps most, that are struggling to even have a decent and comfortable lifestyle. Many of us cannot afford basic things such as living, housing, and a quality education. That, my friends, needs to be fixed before we even begin to think about colonization of any other world, planet, or celestial body. Many people think, oh yeah, that's never going to be solved. And many people thought that most people in America were not going to be free. Many people thought that most people in a country such as in the United States could not live without hunger. Most people now in the United States live without hunger. Many people thought that countries as primitive as Russia or China could never come out of their predicament. Most people will forever be poor and backward. When in fact that has changed to the point where now China and even Russia are advanced nations where most of its population live in modern and decent housing. Most of its population live in somewhat a dignified way of life and living conditions. So this can happen in a worldwide scale to where most people, maybe not every single person on earth, will be housed, fed, and taken care of medically and, educationally. But we can achieve an 80% or better at the very least. This is not the case. I believe that we are not yet 80% or better well housed, well fed, meaning high quality diet for 80% or better, high quality housing for 80% or better, high quality education for 80% or better, and a high quality way of life, way of living, and living conditions, meaning work, meaningful work, and a happy and clean and dignified lifestyle and living conditions. We have not made it yet to 80% or better. If we have made it to the 50% mark, I would be surprised with the limited amount of knowledge I have. But as far as I've heard, as far as I've researched, as far as I've seen, most people don't have access to quality health care. Most people don't have access to secure, quality, affordable and dignified housing. Most people don't have access to quality education. Most people don't have access to quality and secure food supplies. So that is where we stand as a world, and we cannot think of moving a part of our population to Mars to live in a bubble when the Antarctic and the Sahara desert remain empty and desolate. When the Antarctic, the Arctic, and the Sahara is 80% filled with humans, then you can come back and talk to me about moving a part of the human population to a dome bubble in Mars. Another reason why I think it's ludicrous to move to Mars, again, let's talk about the conditions in Mars. Again, the radiation on low Earth orbit is, I believe they said it was about 100 times more. Let's say between 10 and 100 times. Let's call it 50 times, just to be on the safe side. I have to look this up again, but let's call it 50 times as much as down on the surface of the Earth. I'm talking about the radiation level, cosmic rays, radiation coming from the solar wind, etc. You are exposed to radiation about 50 times or more as if you did on Earth. Again, radiation is high energy particles that bombard your body, the cells in your body, that may damage cell functions and DNA to the point where cancer is a lot more likely. Cancer being cell growth, abnormal cell growth, that could lead to death, and as it does many times. So that is a problem on the surface of Mars. There is no atmosphere and magnetic field or an ozone layer. There is none of that protecting you from the constant and just unimaginable amounts of radiation just showering you day in, day out, 24 hours a day, 300 and however many days of the year the Martian year has. You will be constantly bombarded, unless, of course, you live in a bunker several 100 feet underground. So what quality of life are you going to have if you live like a mole in tunnels on an underground city on Mars, when you can do the same here for a lot less cost on Earth, in the Arctic, wherever else? So think about that. The gravity is another hurdle that we have not surpassed. When Richard Zubrin talks about Mars, he basically doesn't even talk about the very low gravity that's on Mars too much. He mentions it very sparingly, dismisses it as a minor problem that we can deal with, but in fact, living in microgravity and a planet that has only a fraction of the gravity is a big problem. That's a huge problem. That's probably one of the biggest problems, because if you want to maintain the same body type more or less as you do that you have on Earth, unless you want to be the size of a probably a mouse or something. If you want to shrink humans to the size of mice, this could be probably viable. But if you want to keep humans bigger than a cat or a dog, as far as body size, then you have to have a gravity that's very similar to Earth's. Having a gravity that's 25 or less percent of the Earth, you're talking about body size 25 or less percent of what the human body is. The human body is, again, has evolved. Its size, the size of its organs, the size of the entire body has evolved in the last millions of years because of the Earth's gravity and because of the conditions on it. If you change those conditions, you have to change the size and shape of the body. And again, through genetics, through natural selection, this could be accomplished, taking many, many, many generations, many, many, many deaths, many, many problems arising, other problems, health problems, genetic problems, etc. So that is a hurdle that we have not cleared, the question of gravity. We obviously cannot live in a rotating mechanism on Mars. Why go to Mars to live on a rotating artificial gravity machine when we can do that either in low Earth orbit or on any other outer space facility or station or ship. In fact, it is easier to do that in space, in outer space, than on any surface of any planet. So unless we can create artificial gravity other ways, which we have not, there's no hint of us generating gravity artificially. That's something that we have to bring up every time someone mentions going to Mars. Another hurdle that we have not surpassed, that we have not solved, in opposition to what Elon Musk's and people like Richard Zubrin tells you, we have not solved the problem of temperature. Mars, again, is colder than any of the coldest places on Earth. And again, there are such cold places on Earth that we don't dare even think about moving there, living there, or even visiting there. Yet we are actively thinking, some of us, about living in a place like Mars. The temperature on Mars. So the average temperature on Mars, I just found out, is minus or negative 81 degrees Fahrenheit. It could range from about 70 degrees in very short periods, very short times, and the equator to about negative 200 degrees Fahrenheit. So that type of temperature fluctuation is just so extreme that no living organism on Earth has been able to adapt to it, let alone humans or anything resembling humans or anything resembling humanoids. Again, biology has its limits. Obviously, Earth biology has limits that are very much, even outside of Earth's limits of what the Earth could give, which is a lot less than Mars could give. I mean that the limits in the temperature and environment on Earth are a lot less extreme than they are on Mars. Yet life has not existed in many of the environments. Life does not exist in many of the environments on Earth, again, which are less extreme than the environment on Mars. So we are thinking of living as organisms in an environment that the most extremophile on Earth cannot adapt to, has not been able to adapt to, with billions of years of chance for evolution, for change to occur. Yet we think that we can live on Mars. Yes, we are capable, I believe, to live on the surface of Mars, but we basically have to bring Earth-like an Earth-like environment to Mars. We have to bring an Earth-like gravity, an Earth-like temperature, an Earth-like atmosphere with us to Mars. So we basically would not be living on Mars. We basically would be living on an artificial piece of Earth on Mars. If we were to touch Martian surface without outside of that bubble, we would be pretty much dead within minutes. Whether that piece of Earth atmosphere or surface or piece of Earth is in our spacesuits or a domed bubble city or a vehicle, that Earth-like environment must accompany us everywhere we go on Mars, and that is something that we will not be able to escape from, not with the technology we have, or we can even foresee right now. Another big question that we have not solved, unlike Elon Musk, when asked about that, he just evades the question or shrugs it off about biology. Same thing with Richard Zubrin and his cohorts, people that think like those people. When they're asked about human biology and how will it be viable on the surface of Mars, if it even will be viable on the surface of Mars, these people don't have an answer. I don't think anyone has an answer just yet. But NASA and other space agencies do have a very good idea what would happen, because this is not an entire mystery. I mean, yes, with humans it's a mystery, but we can extrapolate from other living organisms which have attempted to give birth in outer space in low gravity, have attempted to conceive and give birth, or better said, since they've been animals, to my knowledge they have been all animals, they have tried to mate and produce offspring in space, and this is a knowledge that we have, surely, and we can extrapolate that to humans. Yes, humans are different from many other animals, but there are many animals that are very similar in makeup, genetically, biologically, in many other ways, such as chimps are very similar to humans in many other ways other than genetically. And we can conduct experiments with animals. Even mice have very similar genetic makeup as humans, some mice. So we can conduct experiments with those. So I just found out that we have no data on, or at least it's not that we have no data, we have no successful experiments where animals have been able to breed in space. So as of right now, no animals have been able to breed and produce offspring in space. So we can extrapolate from that and at least conclude that it's going to be at the least very unlikely that humans will be able to successfully and without problems or without major problems reproduce in low gravity, in the low gravity of another planet such as Mars. Gravity, again, it is so central to the development and normal development of a human, and the normal function of human functions, that it is almost certain that there will be major problems in the development of a fetus, of a human fetus in low gravity, and even and especially in outer space, which has even less gravity than Mars. So that is another huge hurdle that it is unlikely to be solved in the near or foreseeable future. And time will tell whether I'm wrong or not. I will do a little more digging and research on this subject and update this recording as appropriate. But this is the knowledge I have right now, and my conclusion, as many are beginning to come to, is that the settlement and colonization of Mars is just not feasible. Not only not feasible, but it is a counterproductive and bad idea altogether. Thank you very much.